Teachers who matched with one of their students on Tinder. What's your story? When I was a little, my uncle abused me. Then as a teenager I was raped by a friend, and some other shit happened to me after that because I had the victim profile. Nobody gives a fuck about me, so I was an easy target because I didn't have anyone to talk about, and the abusers knew this. After a lot of therapy and personal growth, I'm in a better place in my life, but also sexually speaking I can be kinky, but is different. You know, I own my body, they don't own me, nobody does anymore. I'm strong and I reclaimed my sexuality as mine. What happened did hurt me, but I will not let them win, taking away something that can be really fun when is consensual. While I've wondered the same thing before, how many people don't have trauma? Even if we're talking sexual trauma, most people in general have been through it in my experience. That's just where I get stuck in this thought process though. I'd be curious to know if this is correlational or strictly causational, because I'm not disagreeing that it has been the cause for many. Here's a general article on the matter, mostly tearing down the reductionist viewpoint as a whole, with sources. Here's a direct published study, as well as this study which focused exclusively on BDSM participants. The prevalence and consequences of self-reported sexual abuse among 164 male and 22 female practitioners of sadomasochistic sex was explored. A questionnaire exploring psychological health, social adjustment, and sexual behavior was distributed among members of 2 sadomasochistically oriented clubs. The results showed that the prevalence of self-reported sexual abuse was higher among the participants as compared to the general Finnish population norms. Also, the participants that reported abuse were more likely to have attempted suicide, to have sought psychological support, and to have visited a physician due to physical injuries. Self-reported sexual abuse was also associated with poorer social adjustment, and higher sexual neuroticism. Further, the higher the frequency of abuse, the poorer the body image of the abused male participants. In conclusion, even though the majority of the participants did not report childhood sexual abuse, it had adverse consequences and altered some aspects of the sexual behavior of the individuals that had been abused. I remember being a young child and having arousing thoughts of what I can now identify as a gangbang fantasy, and seeing Jasmine in her chains in Aladdin and finding that attractive before I really knew what that feeling was. My high school boyfriend introduced me to BDSM and I was immediately interested, but maybe not to the extent that he was. I was sexually assaulted about 3 years later, not in a kinky situation, and I sometimes wonder if my interest in being submissive somehow has something to do with that, but I have examples of that interest predating my assault, so I don't think so. Edit to clarify that I'm fairly certain I did not experience any childhood sexual abuse. I grew up in a kind of fucked up religious home. Anything sexual was shameful and bad and a sin. I remember weird, disturbing/hot fantasies from a fairly young age. I'd be kidnapped, then strapped to some elaborate machine, along with some girl. The machine would basically force us to. I'm not really sure. Whatever my idea of sex was at the time. I think the idea was that since it was out of my control, I wasn't sinning. It was a long time before I connected those strange, immature fantasies to my adult interest in kink. I also think it's interesting that I wasn't in control back then, but I like to be in control now. I always find it interesting how people overestimate their own abilities by simply forgetting all those instances where their abilities didn't match their perception of their abilities. Apart that issue, you've also not taken into account the sheer number of hours spent with the children, as well as the fact that you're in a school environment where you'll still be seeing the kids over a period of years even if they're not directly in your class anymore. This person almost certainly won't have even a single-digit percentage of that time spent with and exposure to the kids they dealt with. Then you have the fact that kids taken from traumatic circumstances and rehabilitated will likely change far more over the next few years than an average kid. The difference stress can make in how people appear is hardly news, and the removal from a stressful environment is another layer of change. He also says he'd been drinking. He doesn't say how much, but even low levels of alcohol can significantly impair cognitive function, including recall. You haven't considered these or any other number of other factors but decided that you know this person is shit at their job. So like I said, not so bright, and in fact I'm pretty sure you're the one who's pretty shit at their job, and I feel sorry for the kids who have to learn from someone so lacking in critical thinking ability. My youngest brother, 24, matched up with a seemingly nice girl on Tinder. They started dating afterwards. She was a probation officer for the county and had been doing it for a few years. My brother was and is currently on probation for arson. They were together for about 6 months when they came to dinner at my place, during which I asked her about her job. She told me she is a probation officer. I then asked her if them being together is a problem since he is on probation. She froze for a good minute, then said she didn't know that he was on probation. The rest of dinner was awkward. Couple weeks later, when talking to my brother, he told me that she decided to stay with him, even though it was against the rules for her job. I guess she was hoping they would never find out, but they did less than a week later. She got fired and will probably never work in that field again. My brother broke up with her the next month. He had the nerve to tell me that he broke up with her because she was being lazy, had no money, and was depressed a lot. I told him he was a giant fucking scumbag. I don't think he even understood why she was depressed. He did not feel bad at all and didn't think he was to blame, even a little bit. He is a big piece of shit. Let's give the woman some agency here and say that she kinda shot herself in the foot here too. Yes, she definitely did, but the fact that he broke up with her because of specific reasons caused by her losing her job is the shitty part. He didn't feel bad, even though he should have if he cared for her. Thank you. She was the professional and knew the risk. The dumping is harsh, but she made her bed. He clearly wasn't as invested in the relationship. Obviously he should have never been in one with a probation officer, but he wasn't obligated to stay with her because she screwed up her own life and had to deal with the consequences. Pretty shitty decision making all around. Way before Tinder. We had a HS teacher, an way older male who taught math, have an affair with a female student. She was a senior that turned 18 at the end of the school year, but they had been together over a year. He and his wife divorced, and he married the 18-year-old. He was allowed to keep teaching, and when she graduated college she was hired as a teacher in the same school in his department. Of course this was in the late 1970s and I graduated in 1982, but I had them both as teachers. Something similar happened at my sister's school 10-ish years ago. Gym/soccer coach married one of his high school seniors. I'm pretty sure they're still together and didn't start officially dating until she was 18, but still insanely creepy. In my high school, I was cool with a band teacher who once made a comment about another student being really hot when she passed by. Never thought it was weird until I was an adult. That's gross, ha ha ha. Both my high school gym teachers had affairs with students. The worst one was when the affair was discovered by the police on a domestic abuse call at the motel. Mr. Aylward and the girl he was with were doing the deed. I guess he was headbutting her in the stomach and broke a lamp throwing it at her. Huge fight, was on state news. It was quite the drama. Shittiest part is Mr. Aylward has fairly recently married and his wife was 6 months pregnant. I was always creeped out by him. But I guess lots of girls have had affairs with him. Mr. Aylward. Exactly, this happened at my school. Only the female teacher ended up cheating on the male teacher and they ended up divorcing. Messy ass couple. Can you please give details on what happened to them, please? I had her junior year for math and him senior year. I graduated in 1982 and went to college. I didn't have any younger siblings that went to that HS, so I really don't know. He was in his early 50s then, so if he is alive he would be late 80s or early 90s and she would early 60s. This story comes from pre-Tinder days. But I'm the product of a student and her second-year maths lecturer. Student and lecturer ended up getting married, starting a family and growing old together. But there was some serious fallout. Lecturer's supervisor decided student was a harlot and tried to manipulate the entire maths department into flunking her. When nobody would comply, he kept trying until the day she had to call in sick for her final honors exam. She verbally told supervisor she was in hospital and unable to attend. Supervisor said it was fine and she could make it up when she was well. The next week she rocked up, ready to take the exam, only to be told she'd flunked and there was no second chance to sit the exam. He denied all knowledge of the conversation. Student still managed second-class honors, despite all this.